Don't cry.
I'm trying not to cry.
Don't cry.
But
I'll cry.
Get up and don't miss a minute of Get Up Mornings with Erica Campbell.
On Praise AM 1310 and 95.1 FM, Indy's Inspiration Station.
The following program is paid for by Lee, Cossell, and Feigley, LLP. The views and opinions expressed are those of the sponsor and do not necessarily reflect the views of Urban One and its management. And now, to address the legal concerns of the community, Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM presents Legally Speaking. Here are today's hosts.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Mr. Lee.
Thank you for joining us today for another edition of Legal Issues of the Day. We have some important issues that are facing our state and our country, and we have a superstar panel, as always, with Attorney Milton Grimes from LA and Attorney Vanita Banks. Also, we have our distinguished prosecutor, Ryan Mears. And we're going to start off today with something that's been bothering me. There appears to be a significant attack on prosecutors, particularly African-American prosecutors who are involved in the Trump case. In the event you haven't noticed, I've seen some glaring examples, I thought, of what appears to be some overreach. Like, for example, even in the Georgia case involving Fannie Willis, they filed for disqualification. And the judge had this lengthy evidentiary hearing, Milton, and I was stunned because I'm thinking normally you file a motion, you attach affidavit, you make a decision, move on. But it became a clown show to me by having witnesses testify, and they had no evidence to support what they were saying. You know, no real evidence, no real proof, and the whole idea was just ludicrous to me that somehow, because people have a relationship, it somehow taints the ability to prosecute someone. It just was so outrageous to me. But in any event, we'll start off with that. Prosecutor Mears, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Great to be on here, Nate. I appreciate you bringing some attention to this topic.
Well, this is very important. You're a prosecutor, high-profile cases. I mean, I got to ask you, do you feel the heat because of the person you prosecute, and what the hell are you going to do about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you should never have to feel the type of pressure that DA Willis, as well as what's going on with Alvin Bragg in Manhattan, are having to put up with. And it's really, prosecutors need to be insulated in the sense that they're a check on people who have power. And prosecutors have to be able to pursue people who are in positions of power if they, do something wrong or potentially illegal. And what we're seeing all across the country is the attack on prosecutors because people don't want them to hold people accountable. And that, to me, sends a really terrible message to not only people in the criminal justice system, but our community as a whole, that if you're in a position of power, you have an authority, that these intimidation tactics and things that they're doing can somehow disincentivize or deter prosecutors from pursuing justice. And what's particularly bothersome to me is, especially when you look at the case in Atlanta, all the material facts are out there. I mean, Trump said this stuff publicly. It's not like there's any evidentiary disputes, really. It really is just a matter of applying the law to those facts. And yet they're really, engaged in a pretty significant campaign against prosecutors to try to undermine their credibility, undermine credibility of the judicial system. But none of this should surprise us because Trump has consistently attacked the very foundation of democracy, which is elections. And now people who are elected, who are in positions to try to hold people accountable or set precedent that this type of behavior isn't allowed, now they're finding themselves attacked in an effort to try to dissuade them for pursuing these charges, but also to try to undermine a verdict, which could very easily be guilty against the former president.
The second issue, and this applies to Milton also, recently in the governor's race, the Republican ran the nastiest, most racist campaign I've seen. But one of the attacks was on prosecutors. They didn't like the idea, I guess, of the prosecutor in our county saying that it's unfair to prosecute people for these low-level marijuana possession. And did you pay attention to those commercials as a prosecutor?
Yeah, and to me, again, it's just this idea of, there are large sections of our community that certain people just don't care about and don't really have any interest in not only doing outreach to, but making sure that we put those individuals in a position to ultimately try to be successful. And the message to me was, hey, we want a lot more people in the criminal justice system. And these low-level prosecutions for marijuana is what's wrong with our country, when nothing could be further from the truth. And instead of trying to come up with solutions for these systematic issues that cause many of the problems that we have in our community, instead they try to say, well, hey, if we just prosecuted marijuana, everything would be better, which nothing could be further from the truth. And it would be nice if politicians put that same energy and effort into actually trying to come up with solutions to these problems, as opposed to trying to vilify prosecutors and vilify people in the community and act as if, hey, if we had more marijuana prosecutions, everything would be great. The reality is there's a lot of systematic issues that cause some of the challenges that we face. And until people are willing to really roll up their sleeves and address those systematic issues, we're not going to find ourselves in a better state or a better city. And I thought those ads were particularly distasteful just because the governor has nothing to do with what a prosecutor does. It has really no bearing on the governor's race. And there's a lot of things the governor can do to try to help people. And they didn't talk about that. Over the course of the last 2 weeks or the last month, we've seen multiple kids who have died because a state-run agency that's headed by the governor, DCS, has failed kids. And we have stepped in and we have charged parents with murder of their own children. And if you want to talk about things you can do to help the community, you're in charge of DCS. Make sure DCS does their job. Make sure you put people in there who know what they're doing. But right now we have a financial planner from Carmel heading up DCS. And so it's just, it's not only insulting, but it also speaks to the lack of priorities and people's willingness to come up with actual solutions.
Well, Milton had the same issue out in LA. His prosecutor tried to have a fair system. What happened out there in LA, Milton?
You can see he's under attack for being soft on crime and soft on criminals. He's trying to not file gang allegations against young people unnecessarily, where it's not really part of the act and the crime that they allege or accused of or charged with. So he's under severe attack from within his own office. Half of the deputies in there, I would estimate, and I don't have an accurate count of it, but it appears as though half or more of the deputies in there do not support his goal. So he's under attack. You said something though that caught my attention, that they want to be focusing on the small marijuana growers or sellers, and they want to fill the prisons up. Is that a goal here? Ryan, good morning, first of all.
Yeah, good morning. That's certainly the goal here in Indiana from people who are running for governor. It's beyond ironic that the same day that they talk about moving marijuana from Schedule 1, which means they treat marijuana in Indiana the same way they treat heroin, which should tell you about our priorities, that people are running for governor saying we need to prosecute low-level, not even growers, just possession, people who have a joint, and that's somehow going to make our community safer and more fair.
Well, the other thing too
that's scary
is geography, Mr. Prosecutor. The people running for governor in Indiana were saying that we got to protect our southern border. Do they know that our southern border is Kentucky? Do they know that it's more than 1,000 miles to freaking Mexico? It was so insulting. I'm thinking, do they think the people in Indiana are complete morons? Protecting our southern border from who?
About the facts, they just want to participate and join in the national narrative, I guess. Is that it?
Yeah. But I'm like Nate. I was like, man, I'm glad they're going to protect us from Kentucky. That makes me feel a lot safer.
I was trying to think, were they talking about basketball or something? I'm thinking, who are they out of their freaking mind? They kept talking about law and order, protect our border, and they support Trump, the serial criminal, at least allegations are. And it just bothered me. I'm thinking, do they think that the voters in Indiana are that dumb not to know that? And the second thing, too, I'll make it real clear. Drugs that come into our country, they come from everywhere. Land, sea, air, Canada, Atlantic Ocean, Pacific Ocean. I'm trying to think, what do they think? What are they talking about? I mean, when I was down in South Florida, a plane crashed in Lake Okeechobee. They're filled with all kind of drugs.
Well, Nate,
Tons of drugs.
when you get people whipped up into frenzy and excited, people lose their individual thinking and just go with the crowd, the mob, and that's what they're doing. They're whipping them up.
Well, Attorney Banks, didn't they attack your prosecutor, your former prosecutor there in Cook County? I guess, what was the name? Was it, I can't think of your prosecutor that, she didn't run for re-election, right?
Kim Fox.
Kim Fox.
Absolutely. You're referencing Kim Fox, and she has been subject to a lot of attacks as well. And she did decide not to run in the upcoming example. She's yet another example of Black female prosecutors that have been targeted across the country. We just spoken about attorney and prosecutor Fonnie Willis. And I'm focused very closely right now on the unfair conviction of former Baltimore prosecutor Marilyn Mosby, who has been criminally convicted in a case where she's facing up to 40 years in federal prison and she's been targeted for her attempts to balance the scales of justice in Maryland. And so right now, there is a very, very strong effort to petition President Biden to pardon former prosecutor, Baltimore prosecutor Marilyn Mosby, whose alleged crime is withdrawing money from her own retirement account to buy a home for her family. And so she may be one of the only people in the United States that have been criminally convicted for using their own money in their own retirement account. You may recall that that Marilyn Mosby is the prosecutor who, among many actions, returned an indictment in the Freddie Gray case and actually indicted Baltimore police officers who ultimately were acquitted. But she became a target during the former president's administration. And so just another flagrant example. I'm encouraging everyone to please go to colorofchange.org and sign the petition that will be submitted to the Biden administration seeking a full pardon of Marilyn Mosby.
I would certainly sign that. And the reason being is that I see these constant attacks by people of power against prosecutors when they are doing their job. I thought that was a shameful episode, the way they killed that young man over in Baltimore, and they should have been held accountable. And the Justice Department did not intervene at any time to prosecute the officers who I thought should have been held liable. We see this occurring all the time. This week I saw down in Volusia County, Florida, where the sheriff shot the military guy.
Oh,
And so you see this time and time again. So if prosecutors don't have the ability to have objectivity and common sense, we can't have a democracy, in my mind. And so I'm concerned about that, because we have to have these fair-minded individuals who have discretion to administer justice in an equal and fair way, and not be subject to, in that case, the police union was dominant, as I recall. Is that right, Attorney Banks?
absolutely. We're seeing the dominance of police unions across the nation, of course, even here in Chicago as well, where Mayor Brandon Johnson is completing his first year. It has been a topsy-turvy year. He's had some gains, and he has had, let me just back up and say he was backed by the Chicago Teachers Union. And so he has experienced attacks as well, that he's not being, quote, that he's not supporting law and order, if you will, as he's trying to balance so many issues here in Chicago, including the migrant crisis as well.
Well, I'm ask Prosecutor Mears, what can we do? These aggressive attacks on prosecutors where the evidence and facts are distorted by the politicians. For example, the law and order and protect our border slogan, for example. Then nobody paid attention to the fact that Donald Trump had the Republicans bow down and say, we're not going to pass a bill. Now, let's make something really clear. If we're talking about the border, we're talking about the Mexican border that borders Texas and Arizona and California. Now, the problem is that in order to have a border policy, you have to have lawyers, judges, and border patrol agents. And those agents have to have equipment, surveillance equipment, drones, and all that thing. It takes billions of dollars in funding to fund the legal system and apparatus to process immigrants. America is a country of immigrants. And I'll tell you how critical this is. Milton, and I got to be honest with you, I had my house painted, and I had some Americans attempt to paint my house, and they had to go out and find some foreigners go at the upper level because the Americans did not want to go up a 50-foot ladder. I'm thinking, and it was amazing to me. I'm thinking, and then you watch some of the large stories, the horrible incident of the bridge in Baltimore. Those weren't Americans that got killed on the freaking bridge, that dangerous type work. So, the question is, what do we do now to turn this critical tide? What is the solution? Starting with Prosecutor Mears, what can we do to get some sensibility back into our justice system? Because we're seeing these constant attacks and these fabricated claims by politicians.
Well, I think the first thing from the role of the prosecutor is you can't be deterred. And although you are going to experience, really just an intense level of vitriol and hatred, all of these prosecutors need to continue with those prosecutions. And, that I think that's the biggest thing, is not backing down and continuing to pursue justice, even when that has consequences beyond what goes on in the courtroom. And, I think the other part too is we need to remind people that when Donald Trump was president, when he took office, he had control of the Senate, he had control of the House, and he had the presidency, and he didn't solve any of these problems. He had his Congress, and they couldn't get it done. They didn't do anything on immigration. The only thing they could come up with was to kind of build a wall, and his chief of staff ended up getting indicted over building that wall. And so I think for us, it's just, we need to remind people about the reality, but the people who are involved in the system, when we talk about prosecutors, we need to continue to pursue justice and pursue these charges. And, Trump is going to say a lot of things and do a lot of things, but it's really important that we send a message that everybody can be held accountable in our criminal justice system, including the former president. And if that happens, I think ultimately, I have faith that people will ultimately trust the result, and we can help rebuild integrity in our legal system. Because over the last 3 or 4 years, it's not just individual prosecutors, it's judges, it's the laws, it's the FBI, it's everybody involved in this process. People have tried to take down, and none of those agencies and none of those people are perfect. And there's a lot of flaws in our system. But at the end of the day, the system works if the public has confidence in it. And we need to help restore that confidence by respecting the rule of law, respecting those verdicts, and help build up the credibility of those institutions who are involved in the criminal justice system and the legal system, because that is really the foundation of our country.
Yeah. Now, Milton, real quickly, in LA, you told me before the show started in terms of the level of participation and support for the current prosecutor. Why is it that there what exactly are the policy that they're attacking that prosecutor in LA, and what are the consequences?
Well, he ordered his prosecutors not to file so many gang allegations where it is not a gang related crime, but just because a young man was a gang member at some point in their life, prosecutors readily file gang allegations to get enhancement on sentences, force negotiations and acceptance of prison sentences that are far in excess of what would be reasonable for the crime. So he's taken that weapon out of the hands of the prosecutors, cut back on filing gang allegations and gun enhancements. It's just a feeling that the right or the conservatives feel that he's soft on crime. So that's what's happening. That's one of the things that's happening.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Attorney Mosby's record, as you know, as a prosecutor, is exemplary. She is a first generation college graduate of Tuskegee University and Boston College Law. She was elected as the youngest chief prosecutor of any major city in the United States in 2014. And she's been targeted for her relentless commitment to justice. And during her 2 terms, she established programs that would provide nonviolent drug offenders with alternatives to incarceration. You're referencing the marijuana prosecutions in Indiana. A few minutes ago, she refused to prosecute marijuana possession cases, and she started one of the country's only youth and prevention departments. That's a model for the nation. However, her courageous commitment to justice made her a target for this type of punishment. And she's being targeted and punished for pursuing and upholding justice. So I hope that everyone that hears our voice today will go to colorofchange.org and sign the petition that seeks a full pardon of Marilyn Mosby, who has been wrongfully convicted.
Nate, you said something, if I may. You finished, Vanita?
Yes.
You said something that I've been sensitive to ever since I did mass tort case in Texas against British Petroleum about the working conditions of people and how corporate America exploit immigrants and people that are here maybe illegally, but definitely minorities and immigrant people and people with low education. They give them $20, $25 an hour on some of these very dangerous jobs that they can't get most Americans to do. And these jobs are dangerous. Like you talking about that bridge collapse. And I was listening to some of the workers talking about having injured their back and being in the hospital for a year and different other problems that they had on the job because they weren't giving them any safety equipment to climb up high. They were the only ones desirous to go up high and put themselves in dangers to support their families. The same thing I saw at British Petroleum in Texas. They had these people working in the oil refineries under dangerous conditions. They were having explosions and fires. And because the people were on contract and not employees, they didn't have to register them with OSHA so that they could hide the deaths and the injuries on their plant that way. So I don't know how we solve this problem other than prosecutors cracking down on corporate America for the dangerous environment it is putting people in. And that came out in that bridge incident. That's what I got to say.
Well, unfortunately, I see that in our practice, but they, in our state, they're protected by our workers' comp laws. Our workers' comp laws, it's got very narrow exceptions that allow you to sue the employer
Right.
for gross misconduct. I see it all the time. And I've only been successful twice in going beyond the ability of the workers' comp law to sue an employer. ironically, one of the cases I tried was against Indiana University, and it was called a Frampton case. Basically, you have to show intentional misconduct. Is a very high standard, but we have maybe 15 to 20 cases each year we consider, and maybe we may try it in one case because the law in our state is not very supportive of suing employees, even if they do gross misconduct as a general rule. But I think that if legislators are looking at this more carefully, I think that this is something that they need to look at upcoming years and have some legislation to protect workers. See, the other thing too is that we're making immigration a political issue when it shouldn't be. The people that are trying to come to our country, they're just trying to get jobs and support their families. America is a country of immigrants. We didn't get here first, it was Native Americans. And so the net result is that we have to have a fair system of immigration in our country because we need to have those workers. In particular, they give a big boon to our economy. One of the things I learned, though, during the pandemic is that, if the people coming to our country, say, for example, from Mexico, they pay taxes just like we do under the 9,000 series or something. So they file their taxes, they pay taxes, but they don't get any benefits. They don't get unemployment benefits. And during the pandemic, they can get benefits when they were not able to work because the businesses closed down. And so the American government knows who the folks are, but there's nothing been done to fix that problem because it's not a fair justification of the law if you're going to take the people money, a percentage of their earnings. But the second thing, Milton, in terms of the compensation, the cases that I've personally seen, the compensation level to a lot of the people that are not documented workers, they don't pay them, they pay them about half of what they pay to Americans. I had a couple cases where some undocumented workers were injured and they're making $10 an hour. Their counterpart making 22. And so they weren't making the same wages. And they took advantage of their immigration status. And so it kind of angered me because they're doing the same work and they and that's one of the problems. Now, that's one of the things in which I would like to see our legislators take up. If they're going to hire people, they got to pay them the same wages.
Right. Thank you.
Now, the next topic is the 800-pound gorilla. It's all about Trump. I've watched part of the case in Manhattan. I saw the document case down in West Palm Beach. I paid attention to what happened in Georgia. I looked at part of the Manhattan case. I saw what happened to the fraud case where he posted the questionable bond. They reduced the amount, of course. And so I want to start real quickly with this case involving Stormy Daniels, or the so-called, I think Trump called it election interference. And the funny thing about it is that exactly what they proved, that's what he did. It seems like to me. I don't know whether anybody watched any part of that case, but it was really glaring when they had smoking gun evidence. They were dumb enough to write down their crime. I mean, I don't know, Prosecutor Mears, do you see that Alan Weissenberg wrote down exactly this scheme of what they were doing?
Yeah, I did. To me, that's the interesting thing about all of these cases is these are strong cases factually, and the material facts are not really in dispute. And it seems like Trump is going from, hey, we didn't do this to cover it, as a campaign benefit. We were doing this because I was worried about my marriage, or, there were other reasons or the motivations, and kind of giving up on the argument of, number one, this tryst didn't happen, and number two, that we weren't paying, basically paying her to be quiet. And so it's been interesting to watch that evolution of their argument. But at the end of the day, this is a guy who had numerous issues, numerous issues with women, and it seemed as though his only response was not to change his behavior, but to figure out ways that he could use his power and his financial resources to try to cover up his bad behavior.
Hey, Milton, one quick question. In an
Yes,
opening
sir.
statement, the Trump lawyer denied that he had any sexual encounters with Stormy Daniels, right? So
Right,
they put that front and center.
right.
Was that a good strategy?
He was going to be presenting evidence that it wasn't a sexual encounter. She's saying when she came out of the bathroom, he was sitting there in his underwear and his socks and a t-shirt and his underwear. And she felt compelled to cooperate with him and have sexual intercourse. Trump denying this happened. So he wants to put that denial in front of the jury so that they can be thinking about it the whole trial. Now, I don't know what facts he gave to support this denial. Was he in another location? Was he in there fully dressed? But it depends on, your strategy is your strategy. I don't know enough of their facts to say whether it was a bad or good strategy, but I can see purpose of the strategy is to put that doubt in the juror's mind. We're not going to sit here and let them prove their case. We're going to put up front, this did not happen. We did not have a sexual encounter. Now, you're going to believe that woman of the night, or you're going to believe this good white man? So they put it up front, and that's what the jurors will be thinking about during the whole trial.
So the question becomes, what was the $130,000 paid for then?
It was to protect his family from the shame and the embarrassment and all that comes with even a false allegation. It might be just like we settle cases sometimes. We're not saying that we are guilty or that we did this, but in the interest of economy and in the interest of not dragging someone through the mud, we settled this. So the $130,000 was to protect this embarrassment to my family.
Her testimony, although quite fiery, also, as you know, contained many, many details regarding that encounter with the former president. And I'm wondering whether a better strategy would have been to concede the affair if he's advocating that, he paid the money to, quote, protect his family. And then that way, they theoretically would not have opened the door, if you will, to all this testimony that came in from Stormy Daniels this last week.
Well, I thought that's what the lawyers were arguing, at least on the press conferences, that it was for that purpose, to protect and quieten this allegation so he wouldn't embarrass his family, his daughter, his sons, his wife.
That is the argument, but from my perspective, based on the testimony so far, I believe Miss Daniels in terms of her statement that they did have a sexual encounter. So again, I'm stating he could have stipulated that and still took the position that he's trying to protect his family in the payment, as opposed to lying and stating that it never happened, right? And therefore opening the door to all this testimony that came in by her last week.
Hey, Prosecutor Mears, you had hundreds of cases you prosecuted. If you had to prove that one point, do you think that was convincing what the prosecutor in Manhattan did?
I do, and I think what Trump's doing is just, and maybe you guys can speak to having a client that won't listen to reason or logic. But I mean, he's saying that he didn't even meet her, he didn't even see her, and there's all this other evidence to support that they had multiple encounters, that there were multiple phone conversations, that she had multiple visits with him. And for me as a prosecutor, I love it when the defense wants to fight every single issue, because slowly it just erodes your credibility with the jury, because the jury just thinks to themselves, well, at least one of these things, no matter how small, has to be true. And when you fight every single point, and every single point is a point of contention, I think it takes away from your larger argument or your better point or your bigger point. And so if I was a prosecutor, I would love their strategy. Number one, because I think there's a lot of things that can easily be refuted. But number two, just this idea of we're going to fight every single element and fight every single thing that took place, I think wears a jury out. And ultimately, a jury has difficulty kind of sorting through all of the things that you're saying didn't happen. I think it's far better to be able to say, hey, we agreed that this, and this happened, but this is where the state maybe is going in the wrong direction. This is where the state's case doesn't add up, or here are the issues with what the state is telling you. I've always found that to be far more effective than what Trump's doing. But and Nate, maybe you can speak to this. I know you've tried a bunch of civil cases. What do you do with the client who won't listen to you and thinks that they know best and have the best legal strategy?
Well, I think Milton probably got the best answer to this because he's had some unusual clients in his career. I've heard a lot of his stories, but I remember even starting with his famous client, Rodney King. I mean,
well,
client,
when you can, you withdraw again. When you can, Milton.
Withdraw again. I don't know. Well, guys, I don't know all of their facts. I don't know all of the defense facts. I haven't kept up that daily with it, but I'm just saying when they put it out there that they didn't have this affair, I'm sure he's got some evidence to point to other places where he was. And it's like Satchel Paige said, when they looking over here, you throw the ball over there. When they looking over there, you throw it over here. And that's what I guess their strategy is. I had a case a long time ago in the beginning of my career where my client was charged with prostitution, and she said, well, I was in the hotel room with this detective, and I gave him oral sex and yada yada yada, and then he gave the alarm and they busted in and they arrested me, and that was going past what they had to do to get the prostitution conviction. And so I presented that to the district attorney, and she said, oh, no. I said, well, she can describe his member there, and she said, and it goes sharply to the left when it's erect. And I said, I'm gonna subpoena his wife through you and present that. And so she took a week, came back and said, what do you want? What's your deal? And we were able to get this woman to disturb in the peace because the cop did have sex with her because she could describe his male member, his penis. And so maybe Miss Daniels should have gone that far, to prove this happened between us. This was a physical relationship. I could describe parts of his anatomy that only I would have been able to see doing that. I don't know.
Wow.
She's alluded to some things and gave very detailed, testimony regarding the hotel room, and he was in his shorts and blah, 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 blah. And then also, to your point, Mr. Mears, regarding all the things that he's denying, including the fact that, he never met the woman, had no relations with her, blah, blah, blah. But his own assistant testified that she'd been in their corporate offices, So it's really interesting so far. Yesterday was the 15th day of trial. Next week should be interesting because his former attorney, the fixer Michael Cohen, is testifying next week. And what will be continuing to be the subject of his testimony will be this question of what did the former president know? And he's claiming he didn't know any details regarding, this payment. And so from everything that's been introduced so far, and even I think they're looking at some of his books that stand for the proposition that he is very micromanaging and that he, looks at every single check that, is paid. And so he knew absolutely what these funds were being used for, and was totally, knowledgeable of that. So we'll see what happens next week in terms of Michael Cohen's testimony.
Yeah. One final question from the prosecutor. From what you've seen, that do you think that the Manhattan DA office have put in a solid case so far?
I do. They've got a cast of characters as it relates to witnesses, and they've also got some witnesses who aren't necessarily sympathetic to them because, they have to call people from the Trump organization. But at the end of the day, Stormy Daniels, who again was kind of a wild card on the witness stand, she got out the material facts and she gave them the elements that they needed, and she held up pretty well on cross-examination. She wasn't a perfect witness, but at the end of the day, when you look at what they were able to present and what they are alleging is that Trump did this because he was concerned about how it impacted his election prospects. It certainly seems as though they've put forward a pretty good case. And this idea that he was doing it to protect his family, I mean, that guy did so many terrible things to his own family that it's hard to believe that argument is going to carry the day. But I guess you gotta argue with whatever you're presented with.
Yeah. Let me take one caller. Imhotep, you had a comment today for us, sir.
Yes, I do, and thank you for taking my call, and hello to the esteemed guest and to our esteemed prosecutor in Marion County in Annapolis. Appreciate you, Prosecutor Mears. You get my vote every time. I just wanted to say, with the question of the gag order, and we're talking amongst us in the public, and especially amongst us as African Americans, that there's no way in the world we could get away with what's going on. Violating and continually violating and being threatened by the judge and being threatened by the judge. I'd like to hear Prosecutor Mears' opinion on, I mean, how much more can he get away with? How much more can he get away with it? Because the double standard, the judicial system, we know what the double standard is, and this is like a blatant double standard that we continue to see and see. I've been in court as a defendant before, in the criminal court as as a witness, and I've been in other civil courts and we were always taught to have the utmost decorum and behavior, and it just seems the public is looking at it and especially us as African Americans like, see, this is why we don't trust the system. So I'd like to hear your answer, and thanks for taking my call.
Well, that's a great question, and we haven't even touched on the fact that he has no respect for any court order. And I think what's particularly unique about Trump is not only is he attacking the prosecutor, he's attacking the judge and basically daring the judge to do something. And, the judge has said that he's kind of reached his limit. He's been found in contempt, I think, 10 times now for statements and comments that he has made. Nate, I've been doing this a long time. Every time I've had a situation where someone's been found in contempt, it's been a minimum of 30 days in jail. And that's for violating a court order. That's for not answering the court's questions. But when a court specifically orders you not to do something, as he has been instructed by the court directly, it really is incumbent upon the court to enforce their orders. And when you don't do that, that's when you have situations where somebody has 10 contempt. Finding someone $1,000 who is purportedly worth $1 billion, that's not going to make a difference, and it's certainly not going to curtail the behavior. So I think the judge needs to be more strict in terms of his enforcement of those orders, and it's disrespectful in two ways. It's disrespectful because it's the judge's order. It's the judge saying, "Hey, I'm ordering you not to talk," and he does. But it's also disrespectful because he's talking about the judge and questioning the credibility and the whether or not this judge will be fair. And that's one of the most central things to our system is we need judges who are fair and impartial. And Trump's saying this judge is not fair and impartial. He says it to his face. He says it out in the media. And the consequence is $1,000, which is probably what Trump makes in interest, during the 5 minutes that they have that hearing on some of the, investments that he has. So I think there needs to be harsher punishment. I know, putting him in jail would cause a lot of logistical issues. That being said, he's earned it. And I've never seen a case where a witness or a defendant has been able to say half the things that he's been able to say.
Ryan, don't you feel, though, that, and I understand what you're saying, Ryan, and I agree with that. I think the judge should crack down on him, but I give the judge a respect of saying he's got to sit back and look at, if I put him in jail, if I crack down on him, then he becomes or I become the center of the issue here or the center of this litigation. And I'm trying to keep it off of me and get this thing done. So maybe he's weighing that if he does start locking him up, and then all of a sudden the headlines across the world would be former president locked up, et cetera, and that will draw the attention away from the case. So maybe that's his strategy.
Yeah, I mean, the judge is in an unenviable position because he's damned if he does, and he damns if you don't. And you're right. He makes Trump kind of a martyr if he puts him into jail. And all of the kind of collateral consequences to that would overshadow the proceedings and would give a lot of credence to the people who support him that, hey, this is not a real court. At the same time, we have to respect court orders. At the end of I get them every single day. I don't always agree with them. I don't always like them. But we have to respect them. And when we don't have that respect for court orders, that's really when we see our system deteriorate.
I have never seen judges be so vilified as I have in these cases involving our former president. And even the parsing of the gag order, not including the judge, is a first for me. And I'm interested in Prosecutor Mears and Milton, your view on that. And this judge has threatened to put him in jail if he keeps moving forward. And then he's also told Michael Cohen next week, don't, bait him. I think that he's issued a gag order with respect to Michael Cohen next week as well. But I've just never seen this. It seems contrary to the rule of law from my perspective that he's getting, such special treatment with seemingly no real consequences to date.
But I can see the narrative coming out of putting him in jail. And he's got this bars in front of his face now, and how much sympathy that will draw from the public that's already supportive of him. And then others will join that he has locked up a defendant for speaking out for his rights. And you got him behind these bars. I just think it adds another dimension to his cause that is going to be difficult to deal with if he locks him up.
I agree with you. It's a very, 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 very delicate balance. My understanding that the case may rest next week.
Yeah, so Trump has that hand to play on the case if he gets locked up. I think it would be a terrible mistake. Bottom line.
Like what Prosecutor Mears had said earlier, all the evidence against him is all out there, but more importantly, there are his lawyers, his employees, his confidence are the ones that where the evidence come from.
Right.
Alan Weissenberg was dumb enough to put the entire criminal scheme in writing. He got on an airplane and told him, my lawyer, Mike Cohen, taking care of that. I'm thinking, so now you're saying you didn't give him authority and you told everybody on the airplane that he's taking care of. So he's got so many things out there in the public forum, and until you don't have anything to rebut what he's already said. It's just kind of crazy. So the thing about Stormy Daniels, the only person that can rebut what she said is Donald Trump. Because nobody else was in the room with them at the time.
Query, will he testify? Will he take the stand? If you're his attorney, do you put him on the stand? What do you anticipate next week, colleagues?
Everybody started laughing when you asked that question, Counselor. I like to let you know that. Everybody started laughing. Ryan Mears about fell out of his chair. I mean, Prosecutor Mears, you got a team in there. You want that guy to testify? Why?
Absolutely, because he can't help himself. He cannot help himself. And
he's a loose cannon.
Yeah, he doesn't take direction well, and he thinks he can talk himself out of every problem. And those are the best people to get on the witness stand because there's going to be contradictions in what they say. And, he would be a gold mine just in terms of what his direct examination would say. And then he's got, basically a 40-year record in the public eye of things that you can cross-examine him on and things that you can impeach him on and challenge and attack his credibility on. I mean, there's going to be no shortage of material, and he's just going to make so many statements that are inconsistent with what he's previously said, probably what his defense attorneys have argued throughout this trial, because the truth is he feels no obligation to the truth, and this is the one time where people can meaningfully confront him on the fact that he oftentimes can't keep his facts straight. And it would be great to see someone like that on the witness stand and have to deal with a lawyer pointing out so many of the inconsistencies that he has said over the years. And he wouldn't listen to his lawyer. So even if you tried to prep him for cross-examination, he's always the smartest guy. He's always the toughest guy. And those usually make for good prosecutor cross-examination moments.
The great Milton Grime, could you prepare that guy for cross-examination?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I just think that, like Ryan said, he's going to do what he wants to do. And he would probably be a danger to himself if he took the witness stand.
Attorney Banks, what are your thoughts?
I agree wholeheartedly. I raised the question. If I'm his attorney, I would not be putting him on the stand.
Here's my thought. There's something that's really powerful. He had put so much out there on TV that's recorded. So in cross-examination, you start off with all of these things he said that are so ridiculous in terms of having sexual overtone. Like, for example, he was talking about in one interview clip about his own daughter. I don't know if you remember that. It was kind of a crazy thing when he was, it was just bizarre what he said about his daughter that was totally inappropriate on TV. I'm not going to repeat it. But then the Planet Hollywood, that tape about grabbing women by what. So you got all these things that he said in the public medium that's out there. You got the video footage of him on Air Force One talking about his attorneys taking care of this. And so you got all this stuff that's been recorded in his own voice. You get him on cross-examination, you start playing it piece by piece. They could probably keep him stand for about 7 or 8 days. I mean, you got like at least 5 days of materials. And so it'd be fascinating if he decided to take the stand. It'd be something that I'd like to get some popcorn and see myself.
Well, much of that I think would be objectionable because it's not related to he and Stormy Daniels, although it'd be very entertaining. But I think it would be a terrible mistake to put him on the stand.
Yeah.
Because some of that may come in.
No matter how the judge would try to narrow it, he would open the door to everything, I think.
Absolutely.
He would, and once you do that, you get a flood of evidence that's a lot of times not even relevant under 401 that gets evidence because he starts saying crazy stuff, uncontrollable client.
The judge stated in the Stormy Daniels testimony that his attorney should have objected more when they moved for a mistrial because of they alleged that a lot of her testimony was not relevant to the case. And the judge denied the motion for mistrial and stated to his attorneys that, you guys should have objected more. Some of the stuff coming in.
Well, maybe he's right, but it's going to be appealed and it's going to go on and it'll die out. And he'll become president and he'll pardon himself and it'll go on, or the governor will pardon him.
I doubt it.
Sorry, guys. Okay.
The Democrat governor would never pardon Trump. Never.
Okay.
But in any event, exciting story this week. In conclusion, we got one more minute. Any last word by anybody before we conclude today? Okay.
Vote.
And happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there.
Absolutely. Happy Mother's Day.
Well, happy
Yeah.
Mother's Day. And also for all the folks that are listening, democracy is at stake in this upcoming election. In Indiana, we've seen the most distorted political race that I recall during the time I've lived in the state. Politicians somehow are making issues out of things that they created, such as the so-called border crisis, that they actually created the crisis. And this year, for example, they've refused to allow funding to go through to fix the problem. And so we then see an attack on Black Lives Matter by one of the person running for governor. And based on the fact he said, quote, cop killers. So they just fraudulently making up this dialogue. They keep repeating it, but it's still untrue. So the things that you have to do is that after the day, call 10 of your friends, make sure you get them registered to vote, because the next election could represent the end of democracy as we know it. We got a guy running for president, says that his first day in office, he's going to become a dictator. And when he says that, you need to believe it. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to talking to you next week. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.